Therapists of Reddit, what was your "you must be kidding me" moment? I used to work with children that have autism and Down syndrome, which means a lot of play therapy. I had my moment when one of my clients wanted to sit on my lap while we practiced reciting animal cards followed with their corresponding noise. Forgot what animal noise I made that made him laugh so much that he ended up peeing on me from the laughter. That night was also date night. It's nice that there's a happy story in here. If a date wasn't impressed that your animal impressions are so good they made a little unfortunate fella literally pee himself laughing, then they're surely not a keeper. A client was going to probate court and thought he'd dress up by putting a non-slip sock on his collar as a tie. Trying to be supportive, I told him, "Nice tie." To which he replied, "It's not a tie, it's a sock, stupid." Sounds like someone who would give the same response no matter what you called it. One client of mine bites and eats his fingernails. Gross, but not unheard of. Then I learn he stores his fingernails in a box in his room to save them for a snack later. A little grosser, but he's about 9, so I'm hoping he will grow out of it. What finally made me want to vomit was learning that when anyone in his family clips their nails, fingers or toes, they give him the clippings to add to his box. So when he's eating nails from the box, they could belong to his mother, father, or siblings. Yes, I've addressed the parents about enabling this behavior, but it is still happening. Just today I conducted a threat assessment on a first grader who told his teacher he wanted to stab himself with a knife and die. Upon further questioning, he revealed that he and dad watch The Walking Dead together, and last time on the show he saw 2 people stab themselves to death because they didn't want to get eaten by the zombies. Why are you even watching that show? With a 6-year-old? My parents used to make a point of showing me all the pictures of hopefully staged dead bodies and general mutilation that made up a good portion of Rotten.com when I was a kid. Some people just don't seem to see the issue with exposing young children to very morbid things. Saddest WTF moment. Saw a woman who presented for anxiety in the emergency room. Interviewed her and found out what was making her anxious. The listening devices that had been placed around her home by the government. The lady had psychosis, possibly related to her recent pregnancy, although that part was not certain. And she had 2 small children and had been going more and more quietly psychotic. And her husband hadn't noticed. Very painful situation, but I'm glad we got her help. Funniest WTF moment. Also from my experience, a guy who was high on a cocktail of substances ran into a staff area, took the fire extinguisher off the wall and started filling the hallway with it, and then started shouting the lyrics to Sympathy for the Devil. It upset another patient who was waiting admission for schizophrenia, and he freaked out and started saying Satan, Satan is here, and tried to run out of the front doors. It's the most chaotic situation I've ever been a part of. Intake clinician here. What brings you in today? I'm here for pee addiction. At this point, not the weirdest thing I've heard. Let's go with that. Okay, tell me about it. I watch it 3 times a week, for 15 minutes or so at a time. My girlfriend said I'm an addict and forced me to come in. I see lots of very extreme cases, but this was so minor that it made me stop for a moment. I sent them to couples counseling. Had a client who we found out was storing his own crap under his bed. He would then eat his crap for a snack. I am done for today. I will sleep now. Not a therapist yet, but I'm currently taking a counseling and therapies university course, and we occasionally hear some stories from our professors in lectures or tutorials. One sticks out in my mind because I'd never seen an entire class shocked into silent horror before. A guest lecturer told us about a client he had who used a craft knife to cut open his own scrotum and took out what was inside because he wanted to look at it and play with it. Oh. One that sticks out in my mind was a mother that brought in her 5-year-old for therapy because she was into Disney princesses, which are clearly sexual, and since a 5-year-old is non-sexual, this must clearly mean she's being sexually abused by a close family member. I've also worked with countless couples who have come to counseling for adultery, wherein adultery equals P. One client even became suicidal because she caught her husband jerking off after not having sex with him for months. I know everyone has different values, but come on, y'all. This recently happened to me. I have a client who is a daily methadone doser. During our last session he complained of sleep issues. Delving into this new issue, he described his solution to me. He saves his spit in a jar to drink at night when he is unable to sleep. Saves his spit in a jar to drink later. Worked one summer at a summer school for special needs children about 2 years ago when I was 14. I was just a teacher aide, so most of what I was doing was playing with the lower maintenance children and just running errands for the teachers. One morning, I was helping the kids put their stuff into their cubbies and one of the kids was just standing in front of his, staring at me with his lunch bag in his hands. This was one of the more violent kids who would act up at the slightest of breezes. He was about 11 or 12 and had severe autism. I asked him if he needed help putting his stuff away and he replied with only some mumbling. I asked him to speak clearly and he said, "I'm going to hurt you." I was really confused and asked him to repeat what he said. He then screamed at the top of his lungs, "I'm going to hoo-at-you and swung his lunchbox straight for my head. Luckily, I kinda expected this kind of thing to happen, so I was ready to duck, and he missed. I was not allowed to even touch any of the students because I was not trained to restrain them. So until the teachers got him under control, all I could do was run around the classroom as he chased me until the teachers got him under control. Once the teachers restrained him, he was under control within about 10 or 15 minutes. When the teacher asked him why he did what he did, he said that he was angry because his dad didn't bring him to Denny's that morning. I was assaulted because a kid didn't get to go to Denny's. You almost got the grand slam yourself. I'm a speech therapist. That counts, right? And I see this little kindergarten who also has massive behavior issues. We are working on language and pragmatics because he enjoys calling people stupid freaking B and little dirty W and goddamn disgraces, most likely for attention. He will walk around the room calling me a stupid B, a smelly C, and repeating the word frick until he runs out of breath just to see if he can get a reaction from me. I would work on articulation with him because he doesn't actually say those words correctly, but I figured best to work on that later after I've got the swearing and name calling down to a minimum. I was working surveillance one night at a psych ward, keeping a close watch on a mentally ill patient. Right before my shift started, I was briefed that the patient had started eating one of the light bulbs and attacked a nurse. At around 5 AM he woke up and saw me waiting there at the end of his bed. I said good morning and he didn't reply. About 15 minutes of silence went by before he stood up and stared out the window and said a person is most vulnerable while taking a crap. I didn't sit back down for the rest of my shift. I'm a therapist and have a few of these stories, but this story was actually told to me by a therapist friend of mine. He said that he was working in a mental hospital a few years ago, and he and other staff heard a loud scream from down the hall. They ran to go check it out, and got to a patient's room to see blood all over his face and hand and realized he had torn his own eyeball out. They tried to defuse the situation and start looking around for the eyeball. They couldn't find it. He had eaten his own eyeball. Not so much are you kidding me and more what the frick. Have a master's in clinical psychology and currently working towards my doctorate. I laughed reading this question because I feel like I have at least one of those moments per day at my clinic rotations, regardless of type of setting. One that stood out the most was when I was working a camp for children with various psychological disorders, most with some sort of behavioral concerns. The girl I was paired with had a history of aggressive and violent tendencies. We went the whole day without any problems. That was until we were doing some group physical activity to wind down and focus before leaving for the day. She didn't like that this meant no longer playing with a certain toy, so she took off her shoe and threw at the little boy in front of her. He had autism and immediately started crying and screaming. While someone helped him, I turned to the girl to explain to her what she did was wrong. As I turned towards her, she punched me square in the face, then grabbed a hold of my hair, managed to pull out a good chunk. I'm about 5'1", and this girl was maybe 1 or 2 inches shorter than me and had about 20 pounds on me. Despite being 9 years old, trying to get a safe physical restraint was difficult and comical to say the least. Finally got some help from other staff and we were able to calm her down after about 15 minutes. The kicker was when we told her mom what happened. She basically dismissed the entire thing and laughed about it. So frustrating because you just know this kind of thing is reinforced at home as there is no punishment. The girl then starts hitting her mom, who grabs and holds down her arms. The little girl laughs, looks at me and the other staff member, and says, "Ugh, a little help over here." Are you going to let her do this to me? She's hurting my arm. I went home and did this weird laugh cry for a few hours. Luckily you learn pretty quickly not to take things personally and move on. So things were back to normal the next day. I do occasionally look back at that day just baffled at how quickly that whole situation escalated. Most of the other moments that come to mind involve poop in some capacity. My client told me his family didn't appreciate his interest in guns, to which he proceeded to tell me he is always carrying. He then places his gun on the table in front of me and asked if it made me nervous. It did. But we focused more about why he wanted to know if I was nervous, and it brought it back around to his family. From then on, I made sure to always have access to a door and never put the client between the door and myself again, just to be safe. I provided therapeutic counseling rehabilitation services for people with brain injuries. At a family conference, I was trying to explain to the family that they needed to accept their son brother as he was in the moment and that he was not going to get much better than he was. They were being unkind to him, calling him stupid, etc., and generally being the worst version of family support imaginable. The family said they would never accept him as he was and demanded that I arrange a brain transplant for him so that he could go back to the way he was before the accident. I didn't react, but my student lost it and started laughing uncontrollably. She had to leave the room. The family was outraged at her and demanded to know why she laughed at them. I literally had to explain that 1. Brain transplants are not possible, and 2. If a brain transplant were possible, that would mean putting a different person into their son's body. They didn't grasp this and insisted I could do it if I wasn't too lazy to do my job. I felt so bad for that poor young man. I had a client, an older female refugee that I worked with for several months before she told me that she had court the next week and was worried because she could be deported if found guilty. She didn't tell me earlier because she was ashamed and suffered in silence. She was living with extended family and the family got busted for smuggling and selling cat, a stimulant narcotic. The family determined that she would take the fall for her husband and sons who were behind the operation. At the arrest, the police brought an interpreter for a different language, from a different ethnic group, in a different country than the client was from. On top of that, she said the police didn't have an interpreter present during the questioning at the station and she waited there for almost 2 days until they found an interpreter for her language. I asked her if she understood what was happening and she said her lawyer, public defendant she met once, told her she would be deported. Beyond that, she had no understanding of the situation, process, etc. I had seen her psych eval stating that she had the cognitive equivalent of a 7-year-old. So I told her that we have information that could help her case and that her lawyer should see it as soon as possible. This was on a Friday. Court was on Wednesday and the client didn't know the name or any information about her public defender. We got a friend to help her collect the information. The client brought it to me on Monday, signed the Roy. Lawyer called me back that afternoon saying they've got nothing to help this poor woman even though the case seems completely set up. I told the lawyer that we've got a whole bunch of insight and data and records that will get the charges dropped. I didn't work Tuesdays and was going nuts worrying and hoping everything would get to where it needs to and in the hands of the people who need to see it. On Wednesday, news from court comes that all charges were dropped. I used to get all kinds of sprung on me at the last minute, then have to perform all kinds of bureaucratic trapeze maneuvers to alter the outcome of high stakes situations. I wrote so many letters. I was hired to be a mental health provider, but I ended up doing tons of case management because nobody else wanted to. I look at them. Forensic therapist here. I work with paroled sex offenders. One time a guy I worked with urinated on my co-worker's car in broad daylight. She was in the car. He made eye contact with her while he was doing it. His PO picked him up from group 20 minutes later. He's currently having a little vacation at a state facility. One time a guy I worked with urinated on my co-worker's car in broad daylight. That's not so bad. She was in the car. Okay, that's pretty terrible. He made eye contact with her while he was doing it. Yeah, alright. This guy is fricked up. I work in a community residence for adults with mental illness. Most of them are very capable and independent. One girl, 27 years old, constantly acts really dumb for sympathy and will do dumb things because she can, I guess. First week she was admitted she tripped on something getting out of bed. She's 5'1" and like 200 lbs. and she fell on her foot and broke some of the small bones in the foot. I take her to get her cast and she gets the usual don't get the cast wet, use your crutches, elevate, blah blah. Since her bedroom was on the second floor, we had to send her back to her mother's house for a few weeks since she would not be able to exit the building in time in case of emergency. Well, 5 days later, the shoe boot thingy to put over your cast comes in and we call her up saying we'll bring it over. Her response, well, I don't think it'll fit, why not? We ask, because I cut my cast off. I got too wet and it was too tight. They didn't give her a second cast and she never used her crutches, claiming they were unstable and she would fall and get hurt if she used them. Her foot never healed properly and 2 months later she fell and broke it again. Had a client who was told he absolutely had to start losing weight else he would become troublingly diabetic and begin losing appendages. He didn't put much effort in, eventually having his foot amputated. Time after that I saw him, I had to explain that having a foot amputated did not count as half a stone towards his weight loss targets. He was genuinely mortified. You have been visited by the sleeping Italian. Comment sleep tight Lil Guido for nice spaghetti and meatball dreams all night. If you comment keep fighting, Papa. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.